present it to you today. My name is Melissa Van Ornum. I am with DVO and I will be moderating this panel. As you can see, we have some good-looking gentlemen up here with us today. Steve Shahadi from Bar 20 Dairy, Bill Kilby from Kilby's Inc., Brian Sievers from Roseline and Sievers Family Farms, and Mark Storman from Nutrient. So we've got a lot of great experience here for you today, lots of stories they can tell and advice that they can give. And we're going to start out giving brief introductions, all of us individually, and then I'm going to ask each panelist a question, and after that, then we're going to open it up to questions from all of you. So that's what we're going to do today. So I am with DVO. We are a digester company based in Wisconsin. We have been around for quite a while. Our first digester went in 2001 in Wisconsin, and it's still running today, which we're very proud of. This slide is to show you that we do not have the upright tanks. Ours are in ground, and we mix a plug flow. If any of you know what a plug flow is, we've combined the mixed technology with plug flow technology, and we have our mixed plug flow, and that's been a great design for us. We are in 24 states right now and 9 countries, and we focus primarily on dairy. Being from Wisconsin, that makes sense. We do have some projects on swine farms and poultry, and quite a few of our sites are taking in outside waste streams along with the manure. So there's lots of different materials that are going through our digester. Oops. And that is it. I don't want to do a lot of talking today. You want to hear from these gentlemen. So I'm going to pass the baton off now to Bill.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. You were going to push those slides forward for me, if you would. No. So this is the layout for our farm. Can you hear me? I think, okay. And so I wanted to, in this slide, next slide, I wanted just to thank the people that made it possible for us to get done what we wanted to do. So our concept at the farm started back in the 1990s when we thought that we wanted to try to get the energy out of the waste that we use for fertilizer out before we spread it on the fields. And so we do use a fair amount of food waste. We're in an area where food waste is available. And one of the people I would like to point out up here is Stephanie Lansing, who has been with the University of Maryland for a number of years in the biology department, who has been working with us ever since we started. And so it wouldn't have been possible to do what we wanted to do without her support. At the time we started, there were very few, you can move to the next slide, very few people who developed or were willing to develop a methane digester on a farm that used flush water and sand for bedding. And so this is the old motor I started out with. It's a standby generator, a natural gas engine that just converted to run on methane, which required some adjustment in the ignition and so forth. So it was an experiment. It was one of my follies that actually turned out good. If you can move to the, okay. And so this is the current generator. We updated the system in 2018, many of you might remember Martin Energy, which is actually, we're located next to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and the Martin family has been working in the energy business in Lancaster for years and years. And so we have a flush system, so we continually recycle the wastewater to flush the alleys again and again and again. And then we have a sand lane, which we separate the sand out from the flush water so that it doesn't get into the digester. And this is just a collection tank before we pump it into the solid separators. We have a dewatering system where we actually take the fiber out of the flush water before we put it into the digester. We're just really after the volatile solids. And then we have a composting system that goes along with it. So we compost about 6,000 tons of organic compost, which we sell off the farm. And this is just a slide of the digester ingress tank. And then we have a food waste ingress. So we're in an area where we can get large amounts of food waste in bulk. And we use basically cranberries and DAF, which is the sludge left over from slaughtering chickens. Just an overview showing some of the equipment. We have a H2S removal system. We use iron filings. And then we have a system where a radiator-like system that we heat the digester with to try to keep it at about 100 degrees. And then we have the flare system. So one of the problems, if you have a question later on, is that very difficult time with the utilities in our area. We can produce twice as much energy as we can actually sell onto the grid, so we have to burn off a fair amount of methane. And this just gives the end result. So the end result of this is that we produce about 2 million kilowatts of electricity a year, which we use half of that. The other half goes onto the grid, and that is enough electricity for about 190 houses. We also take out 20,000 tons of carbon a year, which is like removing 4,000 vehicles from the road. So all this information comes from the University of Maryland. Did an audit of our system last year to show how effective it was. Thank you.
Good morning. Steve Shahadi with Bar 20 Dairy, located in Central Valley, Fresno, California. And we have a digester. I'm third generation dairy farmer. My grandfather got into the dairy business in 1949. He bought a little bottling plant that bottled the milk, and then suddenly decided, well, why should I buy milk from somebody else? So I'll go out and buy some cows and milk cows. I can control the quality of the milk and make money myself. So by 1950s, those 100 cows turned into about 300 cows, and then we built our first dairy in 1960, milked about 300 cows. Well, as the bottling plant grew, we needed more milk. So by 1970, we decided to build a 2,000 cow dairy, which at the time was pretty big. And pretty soon that 2,000 cow dairy turned into a 3,000 cow dairy. And as Producers Dairy grew and distributed the milk throughout most of California, we needed more milk. So my father and I, around early 2000s, constructed our current dairy. We milk about 7,000 cows 2 times a day. And as time moved on, the original 2 dairies are no longer here. We had to shut them down. But with that 7,000 cows, produces a lot of manure and a lot of waste. And so today, again, I'm third generation. I've got a daughter in college studying dairy to be the 4th generation. So my uncle and his kids sell the milk, and me and my family produce the milk. Okay, we've been into sustainability probably for the last 20 years. I mean, my grandfather always believed in, giving back and trying to do the right thing. So he tried to instill that in his family as well. And having family that's lived in the San Joaquin Valley for our whole lives, and from first generation, second generation, third, and now fourth. It's how can we do what's right? So for us, a digester made sense. So we started looking at the digesters in 2007, but in 2013, we actually found a partner called California Bioenergy, which helped us to bring our vision into reality. Of course, 2013, it took us till 2021 to actually get the digester going, but we'll talk about that later. Along the way, we've installed 2 megawatts of solar. We've done electric feeding mixing, which the digester produces the power to run the mixers, feed mixers. And we use all LED lighting. Our system is basically a 25 million gallon covered lagoon system with approximately 7,000 cows worth of manure. What happens is the biogas is captured and it's cleaned up through the skids, which remove the H2S and the sulfur components. And then from there, the biogas goes into our Bloom Energy fuel cell, which is a 1 megawatt size, and that produces roughly 8 million kilowatt hours of power each year. And this is enough power to provide 17,000 BMWs, electric vehicles, their power for a year, which we participate with them through the LCFS program. Along the way, we've received a couple of awards. We got the Biogas Council Project of the Year in 2022, and the U.S. Dairy Sustainability Award for Outstanding Dairy Farm in 2022, and IDFA International Award for Innovative Dairy of the Year. And our CI score was a minus 790. Well, after the digester was complete, we said, well, what can we do with all our free time now? So we got involved with a company called H2B2, which wanted at least 40 acres of ground so they could put in solar to produce hydrogen transportation fuel. Well, I used my salesman skills and said, well, we've got this biogas stuff that's probably better than solar. It works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So in 2023, we became operational with providing our excess biogas to H2B2, which will be selling the hydrogen transportation fuel to the city of Fresno to run their new hydrogen buses and along with other people. So it's been quite a journey, but it's been fun.
Hello there. I'm Mark Sterman. I'm with a company called Nutrient. My journey with dairies started on my uncle's farm. He had 40 cows in central Minnesota, and I've kind of been working in and around the dairy industry my whole life. And what brought me to the biogas industry was the Fair Oaks dairy farms. And so I was actually the project manager on 3 digester projects for Fair Oaks. I believe we were the first anaerobic digester to take sand-laden dairy manure and process it. We were one of the first to put in a fleet of RNG trucks and to clean the gas, to fuel our trucks, to deliver the milk in 4 different states, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ohio. So we had quite an adventure. The first 2 digesters we built with electricity. The second, or the last digester, the one pictured here, was for 15,000 cows, and that was the one that supplied the gas upgrading equipment and the 42 trucks that we ran 24 hours a day to deliver 53 loads of milk every day. And we learned something real quickly, that 11.8 liter trucks, engines blow up when you try to haul 80,000 pound loads all over 4 states. And so we rebuilt engines almost as fast as we could. And ultimately, before the lease ended, we ended up replacing the 12 liter trucks with 15 liter trucks. And they had a much better time of running the fleet after that. But I'm going to pass it off to Brian.
Good morning. You want to advance? My name is Brian Sievers. Thank you so much, Mark and Stephen and Bill, for your introductions and your story. It's, as Melissa stated, this is just truly a remarkable opportunity to finally have 4 quote-unquote farmers be able to share a story of how we've either evolved into an industry that's now rapidly growing. You know, these folks are pioneers. And I just, you know, have a deep passion for what they've been able to do over the years. And when I say these, I'm including Melissa too, because her family's done a tremendous amount for advancing this industry with their technologies. My wife and I, and business partner of 43 years, is sitting here, Lisa, and we farm in eastern Iowa, near Stockton, Iowa. I serve in a couple of different capacities in addition to running a farm, but I also serve as Director of Government Relations for Raceline Alternative Energy, and I'll talk a little bit more about Raceline here shortly. And then I also serve as Director of the Horizon 2 Climate Smart Commodities Grant, and that's a grant that Raceline applied for and received in we received it and executed that grant agreement last fall in September. It's an $80 million grant to advance a new concept, and that's to use biomass from things like cover crops and prairie as feedstocks with our manure-based anaerobic digester that we have on our farm. So this is a picture of our farm and our feed yard. This is a century farm. Actually, our ancestry goes back in this part of eastern Iowa. My great-grandmother was born just north of this farm, about 4 miles in 1851. So our roots run very deep in this part of the state. And as you can see, I'll show some pictures, but we have 2 1,200 head beef cattle confinement buildings. We've got the anaerobic digesters there. And then this is the landscape, though. This is what, you know, summertime looks like in Iowa when the corn and the soybeans are growing. It's green. And our vision and goal, when I say our, I mean Raceline, Rudy Raceline, especially the founder and chairman of Raceline Alternative Energy, and both Lisa and I, our vision is we want to see this landscape remain green throughout the year, and there are ways in which we can do that, and I'll talk about that shortly. This is a very busy slide, so I'll just be very brief, and I won't go into all the detail, but the bottom line is we focus on a circular approach to our farming operation. We're basically a waste product of one end of our business becomes a feedstock for the next stage in that process. So for example, the corn that we're growing in our field winds up becoming feedstock, whether it's through silage or grain for our beef cattle in our feedlot, in our 2 1,200 head confinement buildings. The manure from those cattle, of course, go into our anaerobic digesters. We have 2 CSTRs, 970,000 gallon capacity that we've been processing. We commissioned the buildings for beef cattle in 2011 and 2012. And then in 2013, we commissioned our anaerobic digester facility. We've been generating electricity for the grid ever since, but we'll be transitioning to renewable natural gas production here very soon. Just a picture of our 2 1,200 head buildings. They're referred to as monoslope buildings. They're designed to have a Venturi effect, so any manure emissions, whether it's ammonia or H2S from that manure that might be coming up from the pen as they produce the manure is allowed to rise and escape out of the south side of the buildings. It helps with air quality in the buildings, so we think our air quality and the climate that those cattle live in is second to none. This is just an example of the cattle in one of the pens. We use a bedding in our pens. We also have our pens are 54-foot wide and 85-foot long. The outer 12-foot on each side of the pens are slatted so manure can fall through into a scraper system. And then in the center of the pen, it's solid concrete. There's 30 foot of solid concrete that we put bedding in either every day or every other day, depending on conditions. This is a picture taken actually when we were using ground corn cobs as bedding. We got that from a local seed corn processing plant. We now use corn stover or wheat straw as our bedding source, and it provides excellent bedding. The cattle love it. It creates what's called a manure pack. In the wintertime, when you walk into these pens and it's 20 below, early in the morning, those cattle are all laying in that bedded manure pack because that's starting to produce some heat and keep them warm. So it's before lunch, so I can show this slide. This is our example of our scraper pit manure that comes off of those scraper alleys. The scraper pit is only 2 foot deep, so it's just below the surface of the pens, and that scraper system runs 24/7 to produce fresh manure as it's pumped into the digesters. This is a picture of our 2 CSTRs, again, the 2 970,000 gallon tanks. We have a reception pit building right side of the picture, and that building is where we do the mixing with not only our beef cattle manure. We have taken a large amount of food waste over the years, and in the future, as we start to transition towards taking and adding biomass from our cover crops and prairie, that's where we do most of the mixing and also preparation or pre-processing of that material before we introduce it into the digester. This is our mixing bowl as we prepare that batter for baking. And then this is just a shot. I climbed up our grain leg one day and give you a shot of the layout of our buildings is. Two very, very valuable products that are produced from our digester. If anybody here knows and understands anaerobic digestion, and I'm guessing most of you do, know that we produce digestate. We separate the digestate into a liquid and solid fraction. The liquid becomes our fertilizer source on over 2,000 acres of land that we farm every year. And so we're displacing synthetic forms of fertilizer on those 2,000 acres by using organically derived fertilizers rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and of course, organic matter. And as a result, we've seen our organic matter contents increase significantly since we started using the digestate back in 2014 on our farms. We've gone from around 3.5% organic matter to probably the upper 4 to low 5% organic matter content in our soils over that actually the first 7 or 8 years we saw that kind of increase. So roughly a 50% increase we've seen in our organic matter contents as a result of using organically derived fertilizer sources. This is the solids component that we produce as well. Of course, we refer to it as biofibers. We use that as an additional soil amendment where we remove our corn stover from our cornfields in the fall. So we'll apply this to help replace the phosphorus and potassium that we're removing from the field when we harvest that corn stover, bring it in and use it as bedding for the cattle. This one didn't come out really well. I would say that but bottom line is I wanted to show our new lagoon-style digester that we've added to our operation. And actually, let's just advance to the next one. With our new partners, and that is Rudy Raceline on the left side of the screen and Chris Roach. Rudy is the founder of Raceline and Associates, as well as Raceline Alternative Energy. And Chris Roach is the president now of the renewables division for Raceline Alternative Energy. And this was a field that we seeded to prairie in 2022 in January, and I'll have a slide here shortly that shows the product of that effort. But it really starts to develop the vision that Rudy Raceline has, and that's to produce potentially up to 30 million acres of prairie around the United States in environmentally sensitive areas, marginal lands that maybe shouldn't be in crop production, highly erodible lands, or land that might lie along a creek or stream or body of water. And not only 30 million acres of prairie, but his vision also has us planting up to 100 million acres of cover crops. And all of that potentially could be a feedstock for our anaerobic digesters. This is Rudy's Venn diagram, and this really kind of conceptualizes the idea and the vision that he's brought forward, and that's to produce renewable energy from those feedstocks in combination with manure sources. And in our case, it's beef cattle manure. Raceline has really focused most of the development of their projects on swine manure. They're the leading swine manure digester developer in the U.S., but it's also to help promote and establish wildlife and conservation practices. So in the Horizon 2 Climate Smart Commodities grant that I referred to earlier, we have partners in that grant. We have 14 partners, and we're very proud of the fact that organizations like Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, the Nature Conservancy are all partners with our grant. And actually, there'll be a session at 1:30 this afternoon where you're going to learn a little more about that particular grant and the method and the model that we're trying to develop with using biomass from prairie and cover crops. And then finally, ecosystem services. How can we maximize the ecosystem services we can provide with this Venn diagram of using renewable energy, food production, conservation of wildlife, habitat enhancement to maximize those ecosystem services? Clean water, water storage in our soils, enhancing soil fertility, CO2 sequestration and other greenhouse gases, and then potentially carbon sequestration and capturing of that carbon in our soil as well. This is an example of the prairie that I mentioned earlier. We were standing in front of a harvested cornfield with Rudy and Chris, our partners. This is the prairie that we seeded in January of 22. 18 months later, it looked like this. The material was 7 foot tall. We harvested a portion of that actually just go to the next slide, with a silage chopper, and then use that. We actually In our model, what we want to do is harvest it as a silage material, store that, and then feed that to that reception pit that I showed you earlier, along with our manure. The past year, however, we decided to round bale the prairie. We cut it, let it dry. When it was dry, we round baled it, and then we actually used that as material as bedding in our barns, and just as an experiment. And it worked really, really well. Now, the trade-off is we might not have received as much gas production from that prairie feedstock, but we actually saved on bedding costs for the cattle. So that was the trade-off, and you know, it was also just to give us an idea of how well it worked as a bedding material, and we think it works really well in that capacity. In addition, just back up, I was just going to talk a little bit about the cover crops that we produce. So we're actually just probably a day away from the start of our cereal rye harvest of our cover crops. We plant that in the fall after our corn or soybeans are harvested. So in September and October, we'll seed cereal rye. That grows throughout the fall. It overwinters. There's no winter kill with that particular crop because it's winter hardy or tolerant to cold temps. And then in the spring, it starts to grow once temps warm up and once you get some rainfall. And right now, I would say our cover crops are probably about 4 to 5 foot tall. And so we'll chop that as a silage and stockpile that, and again, feed that to our digesters as a feedstock. Okay, and I'll just maybe kind of conclude with a summary of why are we doing this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our presentation this afternoon, but the potential is immense. If you were to establish 100 million acres of cover crops and 30 million acres of prairie, you know, you're looking at 1.8 billion decatherms potentially per year that could be created from that renewable natural gas from those feedstocks. So the potential is tremendous. We think it's with the D3 RIN potential that exists with cellulosic content of our cereal rye, why the credits that are going to be derived for the renewable fuel standard could be very significant as well. And as well as that, it creates actually what we think is a better mix in that digester when you combine things like biomass from cover crops and prairie. With that, thank you.
Well, you could see we could be here all day. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, we could be here all day with these gentlemen. There's lots of expertise and years of experience up here. So we'll try to keep this a little brief so we have time to answer questions from the audience. But I'm going to start with you, Bill. And I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about your decision to build an anaerobic digester, and also what it's been like for you to engage with the community over the years and how important that's been for the success of your project.
Okay, so our farm is actually halfway between Philadelphia and Baltimore, 50 miles each way, and we're at the head of the Chesapeake Bay, which is a estuary that's had a lot of attempts to protect it. And so we are in a kind of a suburban area, and we have 1,000 cows at our location. We started out with 500. And we've been a CAFO since 1970s, and we've always had to consider the community in everything we do. So one of the reasons that we put in the digester was we started an ice cream and milk processing business in 2010, and we wanted to show how we recycled. And so we recycle almost everything, even feeding the cows some cheese whey residue is in their diet. So we recycle our sand, and when we were doing milk processing, we recycled our glass bottles. So we had this concept to address the community as their partners. And it seems to have worked. I think it's still working, although I'm retired, and I have a younger partner who's doing the dairy. So our objective, as I said before, was to remove the energy from these waste products to use for renewable electricity before we spread the effluent for fertilizer. And similar to Brian's system, we use we use the liquid portion of the digestate to fertilize the fields using a hose drag system, which is much more efficient. And we then sell the compost to Scott's. Scott's has a bagging plant not too far from us. And so we're able to try to recover the cost of putting in the digester. And one of the things I did want to bring up to some of the folks who don't realize it is, although we received a grant to put this system in through the University of Maryland Department of Agriculture through a innovative manure technology system. So we got $1.8 million to do this upgrading of the digester and the installation of the organic compost system. We are able to generate enough income from that. It was $1.8 million. So we bring in about $340,000 a year, which I think we can recover the cost of the what was spent in 6 years. And but I do want to reiterate that we did have to pre-finance this system, which is not always easy for people to do. So you do need to think of that. That's one of the obstacles about holding back on-farm generators is the pre-financing of these before you get any grant money.
Thanks, Bill. All right, Steve, you're up. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about why you chose to put a digester on your operation, and then also how you went about choosing the technology that you've employed, the partners you worked with over the years. Tell us a little bit about how you've made all those decisions.
Yes, again, timing's everything. And then after we expanded our dairy in 2005, basically that was the end of expansion for dairies in California. There was new legislation that passed for environmental regulations. And so it was about how do we do more with what we have. And I thought, well, producing electricity, that's a good thing. We use a lot of electricity. And reducing methane, that's also a good thing. So little did I know, 2007, we partnered with a company called Micro-G that went bankrupt a couple years later due to the financial crisis. And so after that, we looked at a couple other partners, potential partners, but I've been involved with a group called Dairy out of California, which is a trade association of processors and dairymen and promote sustainability and stuff. But through them, we found a good partner, California Bioenergy. And in 2013, we actually traveled down to Bakersfield and saw an operating digester that was working well. And, before that time, 2007, 2008, there was a handful of digesters in California, and most of them were sitting, not even operating because it was inefficient and uneconomical. You'd lose money by operating your project. But over the last probably 15 years, I'll give California a lot of credit. It is very difficult to do business there, and the costs keep rising, but they've been a big proponent of digesters and renewable energy. So grants became available, and through the help of CalBio and Dairy Cares, we spent some time. We applied for some grants, and we were unsuccessful. And one of the biggest challenges that we had is we're not near a pipeline, and the nearest pipeline was miles away, and it couldn't take all the gas that we would produce. So that eliminated the RNG proponent. And then the other challenge is the air quality in the Central Valley is poor, and so running a generator is also not a good option to win a grant. So we tried twice with a generator and were unsuccessful. So CalBio became in contact with a company called Bloom Energy, which said, well, we're non-combustible, we're near zero emissions, and that could solve your problem, and we're very efficient. So 2019, we won the grant, and right before COVID, luckily, started construction, and we're able to get all our supplies and everything. And by 2021, we began producing renewable clean power that powered our dairy. And between that and our solar, we produce about 12 million kilowatt hours of power a year. And our dairy uses about 8 with all of our farming and and dairy operations. So we produce more power than what we use. And again, and then we just stumbled upon the excess biogas and the solution with H2B2. So I realize what I know, and I think that I know what I don't know. And so I tried to find people that knew what I didn't to help me through the process, because we know cows and farming, but all this other stuff. I've become a lot smarter in some of this stuff through many failures and trials, but Grandpa always said, don't give up and don't quit. So we stuck with it, and today we're glad we did.
We are too. Brian, I know you spoke a little bit already about some of the positive impacts the digester has had on your operations, for example, on your soils. So if there's anything you'd like to add as far as the benefits that you've seen to your operations since installing the digester, but then I'd really love for you to talk about how you think that farmers can find common ground with environmental groups and how they can improve the advocacy and just do a better job of maybe promoting and helping people understand the benefits of digesters.
Well, thank you, Melissa. So the response to the second part of your question starts with a story about the first part of the question, and that is, how has it impacted our farming operation, our feed yard, our ability to produce food, feed, fuel, and fiber from our land? And that's really the story with anaerobic digestion. We went into the project saying, gosh, this is pretty cool. There were some closed loop models that had been starting to emerge, in one in eastern Nebraska, for example, that I looked at and evaluated. And I said to Lisa and my parents, I said, I think we ought to go this direction. So we took a little tour in 2009 and 10, I think it was, of some digester facilities in Germany, learned a lot, met with a consultant in Belgium that helped us move that process forward. So we wound up designing, developing, engineering, constructing, and then operating our digester facility, really starting in that 2009 period up to when we commissioned the digester in 2013. And doing so, we were going to make money selling electricity to the grid. And the model we had in our analysis was we were going to sell the electricity for 6.4 cents a kilowatt hour. And that was okay. Probably was below our cost or a break-even point. But we also received a renewable energy tax credit from the state of Iowa for the biogas produced, and that was equivalent to $4.50 per MMBTU. So that was enough to put us into the black with regard to profitability. Well, that was a 10-year credit. And we realized when that 10-year credit expired at the end of last year, and in the meantime, electricity rates dropped from 6.4 cents a kilowatt hour down to the mid 4 cent per kilowatt hour range. We knew that we were not going to be profitable going forward. We had to do something different, and that led us into the renewable natural gas and the partnership with Raceline. But in that process, as we started to use the digestate from our digesters and use that in our soil and our land, that's when the realization set in that this is where the value comes. It's the enhancement to the soil that we work with every day to produce that food, feed, fuel, and fiber for people around the world, essentially. And so when we started to see organic matter content increases, nutrient level increases in areas where we might have been deficient previously, and ultimately yield increases, we knew that we were onto something. And then when you start to add in the fact that we've eliminated synthetic, for the most part, we still use a little bit of liquid nitrogen with our herbicide program, but hopefully as we develop our renewable natural gas project, we're going to get away from that as well. But pretty much 99% of all synthetic forms of fertilizer have been eliminated on those 2,000 acres that I spoke about earlier. We now use organically derived fertilizer sources on those farms. That's the value that I've seen in our farming operation and in our soils, in our soil health. That trend, I mentioned 3.5% organic matter when we started using our digestate. 150 years ago, when our ancestors started farming in that area in 1850, those soils, when it was native prairie, were 8.5 to 10% organic matter content. So you can see what that system of agriculture has done with organic matter contents. And I was a part of that system for a long time. But when you start to realize the impact that using things like digestate in your farming operation have in your soil health, and to turn a trend around to go from 10.5, or I should say 10% down to 3.5%, and now back up to the low 5%, that's a game changer. That's for generations to come. We've now paid it forward, and we're in a pay it forward industry. That's what we love about, I think all of us could say that this industry is a pay it forward industry, and we're very, very proud to be a part of that. So that message is what I would try to then communicate to those who are maybe not as supportive of anaerobic digestion or meat or dairy or pork production or whatever the case might be in modern settings like what we have in our operations. The point is, what we're trying to do is to improve the quality of life for not only our families, but the people that work for us, the people that live in our communities, but also the soil, the air, the water, the resources that we use to help produce that food, feed, fuel, and fiber. And that's the message I would continue to deliver. Stay positive, stay with our message that this is a sustainable model that will continue to evolve. We have lots of issues in our industry, and we're going to fix those over time because we've got people that are dedicated to that. And making sure that that will be a focus of our, not only the American Biogas Council, but I think our industry in general. We've got participants like this sitting here. It's going to happen. Whatever challenges we might have are going to be solved in the future, hopefully near future, with regard to some of the things that the folks in that community, I'll call it the environmental justice community, like to say was, well, what about ammonia emissions? What about hydrogen sulfide? We're fixing those problems right now, even on our farm and our model. So the things that we're identifying as benefits we're trying to promote and communicate that to the public, as well as the areas of our operations that we might not be as strong. We look to strengthen those weaknesses through additional research, technology, and innovation. So that's the message.
I could listen to you all day. We need to clone this man and send him out. I love the passion. Mark, you're also a wonderful evangelist for this industry. And I'm wondering if you could speak a bit about how the role you feel digesters can play when it comes to reducing the dairy industry's environmental footprint.
Sure, thank you. I think the best way to answer that question is to take truly the most significant program for driving the development of anaerobic digestion over the last 10 years in California and look at their numbers that just came out last week. They have a total of 109 million metric tons of CO2 that they've documented that they've reduced. 20% of that, 21 million metric tons, has come from the digester development program. It used 6% of the 6.1% of the funding, produced 20% of the reductions. So one of the largest single contributors to reductions in the program. The value, the cost per metric ton is less than $10, and it's one of the lowest cost per metric ton of any of the technology or programs outside of those that are purely outreach programs, where they're basically ad campaigns to get people to change an activity that are then documented. The last thing is, for all of the negatives that people talk about, the program has brought in $2.1 to the state for every dollar the state has spent on those digesters. So a lot of times, we have to thank Steve and the leadership in California and Dairy Cares. Sometimes they have programs that just keep them competitive with the rest of the country. A lot of the digesters in California, people argue against all of the funds that get given to the dairies there, but the reality is, in some ways, it's just the way California has to do it, or none of those digesters will get built there. So they basically have to cover the regulatory cost with their grant programs, and that brings the developers and the people in. And so I think it's truly a story of how dairy can be a solution to a problem and part of a solution to many problems, because as we know, organic waste can be added. to the digester programs, and we can produce more anaerobic digestion, more renewable natural gas. If you really look at the communities, the first time I ever went out to the Tulare Ag Expo, I thought it was great because I was from the Midwest, it was February, and I was going to be able to drive with my windows down. And I work on a farm, and I couldn't stand the smell. And the last 2 times I've been there, I've not smelled dairies or anything dairy related until I drove by the big mill where they're making feed. And then it was just the smell of them making the feed. There wasn't any manure smell. Now, I'm sure if you live out there and you're there every day, there are times when manure is being spread or digestate is being spread where there might be some odor. It is still farming, but I think the impact that they've made in California is a demonstration of the impact that we can make as an industry across the country.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, that really highlights how we have a tremendous story to tell, and we just have to keep working really hard at the ABC and other organizations and just tell it loud and far and wide. And hopefully more people will start to understand the benefits that our technology can provide, not just the farmers, but the community surrounding them. All right, I think we're at the point where we're ready to take questions from the audience. Anybody have a question? Yes.
What are the biggest reasons that farmers or communities would oppose having a digester?
Sure.
Is it too expensive?
The question is what are the biggest reasons that communities would oppose a digester on a farm? Or why would farmers oppose a digester?
I'll tee one up and then we'll see how it goes. A couple of the reasons that people are reluctant is there aren't always the economics that will help drive it. I mean, you have an investment that's going to take six or so years to pay for itself, and for a lot of people that's outside the range of what they're used to, and in many places, like replacing electricity on your farm isn't enough to cost justify the project. For local communities, it tends to be related to misinformation generally, that they don't understand the digester as a form of recycling and a form of utilizing the things that are already being utilized in the community. So they have the impression that you're bringing in something that might be adverse or dangerous, not realizing that the gas produced in a digester is the same gas that you pipe into your home as natural gas. And so I think part of it's education, if there's resistance, and then a lot of it is we just don't have all of the markets right now to really allow people to build out the technology and pay for it economically, because nobody wants to just break even. I mean, they want to make a profit and be able to move forward and do more things in the future. So I'd say those are the basic things in the community and for the farmers themselves.
So, yeah, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more about the community and what might be reasons they would potentially oppose that. And I'll just share a story. I won't name names, but a very good friend of mine and I, who happens to be sitting right up here, who's the chairman of the ABC, Bernie Sheff, attended a public hearing. I won't say where, but it was to listen to a motion that was before the township group that was going to decide whether to allow the change in a permit status for a dairy farm that wanted to build an anaerobic digester. It was a 600-cow dairy, relatively small dairy in today's model. They can't justify an anaerobic digester for that number. So they were going to bring in some community-based food waste from I think it was going to be whey from a processing plant. And I think there was also some product coming in from maybe a Coke or Pepsi bottling company, which is really good feedstock for a digester. And the community rose up against them. They thought that was basically almost like building a nuclear waste dump in their community. And it was just extremely frustrating. I mean, it left an indelible imprint on Bernie and me as we left that hearing that night. There was, three times as many people in that room as there are here. And most of them voiced their opposition. They had been driven to that by a fear campaign that was created and developed by organizations that don't like meat or milk production from modern agricultural operations. And so they've created this campaign that will oppose anything related to the development of projects that will help solve waste problems in your community with food waste or manure, that for all the things that we've just described, will not allow them to pursue the benefits that are derived from anaerobic digestion of animal manure. And so that's the frustrating part, is we have not done enough in terms of an industry or an organization, and we are committed now to doing more, to making sure we communicate the message to the communities that these are good for your community. We are going to be good stewards of the resources. We'll be good neighbors. We'll continue to be good neighbors, because I can guarantee you that 600 cow dairy, they were a really good member of that community. I could see it the minute I walked onto their dairy. And as a result, they aren't going to be able to, that community won't be able to realize the benefits that are going to be provided by that next step or progression in that operation. And so that's where, as an organization and industry, I think we really need to devote a lot of resources to helping address in those communities, how can we position and advocate for the development of digesters, especially in those situations where it's a small or medium-sized operation that will be a benefit to that community. It creates jobs. It helps resolve waste management issues from these food processors. It helps mitigate odors. It helps improve the quality of the material that you're applying back on that land by taking that manure and converting it into an organic fertilizer source that will enhance the health of that soil. That's the message we need to continue to develop and work on and communicate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It seems like digesters are getting caught in the crosshairs a little bit. These groups that should be in favor of all the things that the digesters provide are opposing us, and unfortunately they're well-funded and becoming stronger and more well-organized every day, so we definitely have our work cut out for us. Next question. Yeah.
What advice would you give to a first-time farmer just trying to get into biogas and building and operating lessons learned and things like that?
The question is, what kind of advice would you give a farmer who is looking to install a digester for the first time?
Well, my advice is find a good team, because in our case, we develop relationships that we're going to be in for the next 20 years. And so, like any relationship, you want to be able to trust the people and feel comfortable with them, and do some research, talk to some different people, get some references, because again, it's a long-term relationship and important. We found a few bad ones before we found our current one, so that would be my advice.
One of the things I'd like to add is on the last question too is we were the first digester in Maryland, and we started out working with our soil conservation district, considering the digester as part of a manure management system. And in the end, we really didn't have to get any permits at all or have any public hearings. But also, in the past, their farm is, we've had good relations. We have 28 neighbors, and we've had good relations with the neighborhood. And so we're part of the community, and it makes it a lot easier, if you do some public relations work beforehand, especially if you're in a suburban area.
I might just add, as Stephen talked about, do your homework. I think Lisa and I went through 54 iterations of our feasibility analysis before we finally found the right one. We worked with a consultant who helped us get to that point. And all of that has to be done in order to be prepared to meet with someone who's going to help finance or maybe potentially apply for and receive a grant from, whether it's a state or federal agency. So just doing your homework and your due diligence is extremely important. Making sure you do shop for partners that you want to participate with. You know, when we built ours, we had a consultant that also was a developer, but they hadn't developed any projects in the US. They'd been very successful in Europe, and we thought that we were going to be able to develop that project. But as things developed, our project was going to be too small to be able to afford their technology. So we had to transition into a new direction. And we wound up being our own, as I indicated earlier, our own engineer, developer, design, construct, and operate. Well, the model has changed since then, and I would say that in today's world, you're going to most likely work with a developer, and I would encourage you to pursue some developers that might be out there trying to seek your interest in developing a project on your farm. There's a lot of good developers out there that you need to talk to as well.
I'd just like to add to that also is you want to look at what your end result is going to be, whether you're going to do renewable electricity or renewable gas or hydrogen cells or whatever. So you really need to decide what your end result you're looking for.
Another question? Yes, sir. Did you hear? I didn't hear the question.
So I think the question was, what about the villainization of natural gas in the public sphere, and what is the ABC doing to help offset that or to advocate for the development of natural gas projects from renewable sources? Is that right, Ron? I work with Ron on our Horizon 2 grant, so that's real. So let me start off with the ABC and the board. Mark and I serve on the ABC board, and we've been very adamant for the last year that we wanted to enhance our communications, marketing, and outreach efforts. We've now hired a director of communications. She has hit the ground running. Melissa Bailey's doing an outstanding job. In fact, yesterday, after the golf, we came back, and there was a interview being conducted. I think Randy Beck, who serves as one of our vice chairs of the ABC, was doing an interview with one of the local TV stations. Well, that wouldn't have happened without a director of communications saying, we need to do this. She reached out to the local media and got an interview conducted right here at the Biogas Americas conference, and it was broadcast live on the news. So those efforts, we're really only starting with that effort, and I think we're going to grow geometrically in that effort because it's absolutely necessary in terms of developing a more robust public relations and marketing effort. And then it also comes down to each of us as participants in this industry to do the same, to piggyback off of the efforts of the industry organization or vice versa. So, as a company, Raceline Alternative Energy has a marketing and communications department and folks that are staffed there. We're looking to increase staffing there as well to help maybe talk about the grant that we are implementing or other parts of the development of our projects within that company. Every developer out there should have a marketing and communications team that would work potentially with the ABC or other industry organizations to help continue to provide that message that's positive, that supports the development of renewable natural gas as a very viable fuel source of the at least foreseeable future, because we don't know what that fuel of the future really looks like. It's probably not going to be all electric. It's probably going to be a combination of potentially hydrogen, potentially renewable natural gas, potentially electricity, and other mixes. Maybe it's atomic. We don't know that, but what we think we can do with digesters, renewable natural gas production, is provide far more ecosystem services and benefits with our processes than what any other form of renewable energy can do, and that's our advantage and the benefits we can provide.
And I would just add that it's key to all of us that we start helping people to understand that natural gas is natural. It's decomposing organic material, whether it's from, prehistory that got buried and is in the geological deposits, or whether it's something that was carbon last year before the plants that Brian showed you he was harvesting drew it out of the atmosphere
and it'll go back into the atmosphere. So it's truly recycling carbon that is already in the atmosphere back to the atmosphere and getting positive use out of it. And so that's the message has to be. This is recycling a naturally occurring energy source and using it in a way that has little or no impact on the emissions and the warming of the planet. And this is something we have to take advantage of. It's irresponsible not to take advantage of it. We heard a fact yesterday at the board meeting that the natural gas industry on the coldest day of the year delivers 3 times as much energy as the electric grid can deliver on the hottest day of the year. And if I would add something to that, it is that the electric grid can't produce that amount if they're not burning natural gas. And so we have to help people understand that right now, if you're going to electrify everything, you're going to be promoting fossil fuel use, and you're going to end up having to, use new sources of energy that, if they're not renewable, are only going to exacerbate the problem that you want to solve by using electricity. Right now, 70% of the electricity in the United States is non-renewable. And so you can buy an electric car and plug it in so you don't see the pollution, but somewhere, like 8 miles from my house, there's the Francis Schaeffer power plant, and as we drive by, we see the stacks going.